One of the things that I've gotten curious about is how often people say the phrase, there's a part of me, right? Like I can even hear it in my own language, like, oh, there's a part of me that wants to do this, but then there's another part of me that says, I'd much rather go and do that. And I'm wondering if just honoring that phrase alone, right? Like, could you speak out what these different parts of you are telling you about what the whole range of things that you might want to explore?
And almost maybe to accept that all parts of you exist.
Yeah.
And perhaps begin to think about what happens if all parts of ourselves are welcomed. That it is not a competition. It is not that some parts are more acceptable or worthy than others, but all of these parts constitute our wholeness.
Yeah, like right now I'm wondering whether if we even just use that phrase, like there's a part of me, makes it a bit easier for people to take in, right? So let's say I'm really, really angry at a person right now, and I could be telling you about it, right? And if I say I'm so angry with A right now, like I could like really kill A, and you could feel like, oh no, now I need to say something to like counter that or what. Versus like I say like, there's a part of me that really is so angry with A right now. I want to kill that person, right? And maybe even just using that phrase allows me to recognize, well, that's just a part of me. And there could be another part of me that says, I could just leave it alone.
Yeah. And I guess as the person listening to what is happening now, previously we were talking about, do we see any issue as a problem to be solved? Or do we see a person in their wholeness having issues? So it could be, wow, Xiao is angry. Let's solve the anger right now. Or it could be entirely different if it's Xiao has some anger. Let's sit with the experience of Xiao's anger and let's look at it. Let's be curious about it. Let's not judge it, or let's just allow it to come up and see how it can sit with us in the moment.
Yeah, the different parts of us want to speak out something, and it feels like if we allow those different parts of us to speak it out, we can learn something from them.
But then often there's the temptation as Singaporeans, 10-year series, correct answer. Then like, maybe this is not so appropriate with this person, or maybe this is not so appropriate for the moment. I think it comes back to, do we accept that we bring all of ourselves everywhere? And do we then have the courage to test and bring out new parts of ourselves that we may not have revealed in this particular setting or in this particular relationship?
I guess the threat level is like, if I name a part of myself that previously I kept hidden, the risk is you don't see it as a part of me, but you see it as my whole. You see that as me in my entirety. So we go back to the like, I'm angry at A kind of thing, right? Like when you hear people talk about like, wow, she's an angry person. And that's almost like, I look at the part of you that's angry and I'm going to use it to represent your wholeness. And that does such a disservice to the person. Like it almost like caricatures them. And like I do not want to see the multiple parts of you. Yeah. So that would then make it so hard for us to connect with another person.
I think that's my worry for our communities also. Sometimes it's like, this community is always so angry. This community is always so...
I wonder which communities you're talking about now.
Insert description, right? And it makes me think about how if there is that sense that I see the community this way, then which parts of them are we not going to understand? If we choose to see this particular anger or emotion or characteristic as representative of all of them, but that's not true.
Yes. And I'm wondering whether we want to go there, right? And name like some of the communities who get labeled with one word. And it's enough, and it's repeated enough that I think it's almost a pattern right now. And that risks that particular community being shoved off. As in like, all right, they are not part of our whole. They are like a weird bunch of angry people. So let's go there.
You sure?
No, well, you know, like sometimes you hear people talk about like activists being angry people.
Yes.
And the people who say like, I don't want to work with activists because they're so angry all the time. Then there's also the discomfort of whether we want to lean into that moment and say, what makes you see activists as angry all the time? And is anger the only thing you see about activists?
And if we want to explore this more deeply, how do we perceive anger? Anger has been so instrumental in creating a lot of positive change, right? Women being able to vote, breaking boundaries around, what is the way we can and cannot treat minority communities. And so much of societal change has been brought about by the emotion of anger. So why are we so afraid of it?
But I wouldn't be able to be unafraid of it if I haven't gotten in touch with my own anger, right? So that's also something I get curious about when I hear people label like activists or certain groups as being too angry. And maybe the other question we can ask in that moment is actually what makes you angry? What things trigger anger out of you? Which might also be an important question to ask.
Yeah.
And maybe a safer one because it's not about why do you see activists that way? But that's an interesting alternative question that we can ask, right? Even if you like take away anger and you hear people who say like, I don't want to hang around depressed people all the time. They bring me down, they make me sad, and I don't know why they're so sad all the time. And maybe that flip question that can be asked that takes the heat off the person as well as the group they're talking about is to maybe be kind to them, because we got to honor that part of them that is being upfront with saying like, I kind of don't want to hang out with such people. Yeah. And the flip side is to ask them, actually, what is your own relationship with sadness? Like that's a really interesting thing that you just brought up.
Yeah. Or maybe what is this discomfort around sadness trying to protect you from? And to just enter gently. I acknowledge this discomfort. Discomfort is good. What do you think this discomfort is trying to do for you? As opposed to, let's all be politically correct. You cannot have discomfort around different communities. You cannot say you must, always be like all inclusive, all embracing, but that's not possible. So can we also find that space, like you said, to be kind to someone who has been vulnerable and shared their discomfort openly, and then to explore together with them, what is this really about?
It makes me realize too, like that's pretty difficult work to call us to do. I mean, it's necessary, but it's also that difficulty because it's so easy and tempting to get into this like right, wrong, hero, villain kind of thing, right? Like say you're someone who is like, I'm on the activist side, and how dare you criticize activists for being angry all the time. And even as you're engaging with a person who is anti-activist, are you able to also hold a space for them? And right now I feel like sometimes the debate gets so heated up around like, why should I hold space for that person who is trying to dishonor or disrespect a group or a person that is so beaten down, or I care about them. And it is so challenging to relate to different parts of society unless I make contact with the different parts that live in me as well.
It's almost like, do I acknowledge my own diversity? There are different parts of me. Some parts are held more to the light. Some parts are more in the shadow. If I have a very uncomfortable relationship with the parts of myself that I hide in the dark, then of course I would be uncomfortable with other people's perceived politically incorrect concerns.